Rewritten title, The Voice in the Water Took My Father, thumbnail text, Don't Look Down, search keywords, cargo ship horror story, ocean monster encounter, deep sea creature true story, anglerfish horror, sailor sea legends, drowning survival story, nosleep ocean horror, creature in the water, script, the thing's grip closed around my ankle like a fist made of wet leather, and I felt it begin to pull me back down toward that ring of grinding teeth. 20 feet above the black water, dangling from a rope my frozen hands could barely hold, I looked down into a mouth wider than a shipping container. And I knew, with a certainty I have never felt about anything before or since, that I was going to die in the dark, and that the last thing I would ever see was a small, warm, glowing light. \n let me go back. Let me start at the beginning, because you need to understand what kind of man my father was before you understand what he did. And you need to understand the rule. The one simple rule he gave me. The rule I broke, \n scene, life on the ship, \n my father and I worked together on a cargo ship. Not a fishing boat, not some little coastal vessel, a massive commercial container ship, the kind of thing that looks less like a boat and more like a floating industrial district that someone tore loose from a coastline and set adrift. When you stood on the main deck and looked from the bow to the stern, it felt like you were staring down a long metallic city block, except the buildings were stacks of steel containers piled 4 and 5 high, and the streets between them were narrow canyons where the wind howled and the shadows never quite left, \n/NWE were deckhands. Manual labor. Our job was to secure those heavy steel containers, to check the massive metal lashings and turnbuckles that held them down, to perform basic maintenance, and to make sure that when the weather turned and the ocean decided to throw the ship around like a toy, nothing came loose. It is unglamorous, exhausting, dangerous work. Your hands are always cold. Your back always aches. And once you leave port, the entire world shrinks down to almost nothing, \n that is the part people who have never been to sea do not understand. The isolation. Once you sail past the last buoy and the coastline drops below the horizon, there is nothing. No land. No other lights. No sense that the rest of humanity still exists. For weeks at a time, your universe is the metal deck beneath your boots, the towering walls of containers around you, and the deep, continuous, bone-deep vibration of the diesel engines turning over somewhere far below in the lower levels of the ship. That vibration gets into you. You feel it in your teeth, in your chest, in the back of your skull. You stop noticing it the way you stop noticing your own heartbeat. And then, on the rare occasion it changes, your whole body goes cold before your mind even understands why. \n my father loved it. He had spent his entire life on the water. The sea was not a job to him, it was the only place he ever seemed truly at peace. He had rough, heavily calloused hands, hands like old rope, and a quiet, unhurried way of doing everything. He never wasted a word. He never wasted a movement. While the younger crew rushed and swore and fumbled, he worked with a slow, deliberate economy, and somehow he was always finished first, \n he carried a small folding knife everywhere. A cheap thing with a bright yellow plastic handle, the kind you could buy in any hardware store for a few dollars. But he treated it like a part of his own body. He used it for everything, cutting thick nylon rope, slicing open ration boxes, prying loose a stuck fitting, trimming a frayed lashing. That yellow handle stuck out of his front pocket every single day I worked beside him. I want you to remember that knife. The yellow knife. It matters. \n scene, the warning, \n \na few months ago, our route was scheduled to take us through a very specific stretch of open ocean. I want to be careful here, because I do not want anyone going to find it. I will not give you coordinates. I will only tell you that it was deep water, far from any shipping lane, far from any land, the kind of place where the charts just go a flat, featureless blue and the depth numbers climb into figures that stop meaning anything, \n\n. I did not know anything special about that stretch of water. Deckhands like me did not see the navigation charts, those stayed up on the bridge with the officers. We just followed the daily work schedule that got posted outside the mess. So I had no idea, no warning at all, until the afternoon before we reached it, when my father pulled me aside, \n\nwe were standing near the stern, watching the white churning foam boil up behind the massive propellers, that long pale wake stretching back toward a horizon we had already left behind. The light was going golden and low. And when I looked at my father's face, something in my stomach dropped, because the easy, relaxed posture he always carried while he worked, it was completely gone. He looked older. He looked afraid. I had never once seen my father look afraid, \n\n. We are entering a bad stretch of water tonight, he told me. His voice was low, pitched just under the rumble of the engines, like he did not want them to hear. We will be in it from sundown until the sun comes up tomorrow morning. I need you to listen to me very carefully. And I need you to promise me, that you will do exactly what I say, \n\n. I nodded, but I was confused, and I think I even half smiled, because I assumed he was being dramatic about a storm. I asked him what was wrong with the water. Were we heading into rough current? Bad weather, \n\n. He ignored the question entirely. That was not like him, \n\n. Do not look at the water tonight, he said. \n\n. I just stared at him, \n\n. When your shift starts, you keep your eyes on the steel deck. You keep your eyes on the containers. You can look up at the sky if you need to. But you do not walk to the railing, and you do not look down into the water. No matter what happens. No matter what you hear, \n\n. No matter what I hear. That phrase snagged in me like a fishhook. I asked him what he meant. What was I going to hear, \n\n. He reached out and gripped my shoulder, and his fingers dug in hard enough that I felt it through my heavy work jacket, hard enough that it almost hurt. You are going to hear things over the side of the ship, he said. You might hear strange noises. You might hear music. You might hear people talking. You might hear someone you know. You ignore all of it. You focus on your work. You check the lashings. You stay away from the edge. Do you promise me, \n\n. There was something in his eyes I had no name for. Not the fear of a man worried about a storm. The fear of a man who had seen something, once, that he had spent the rest of his life trying not to think about, \n\n. I promised him. Of course I promised him. He was my father, and the look on his face would have made anyone promise anything. He held my eyes one moment longer, gave me a single tight nod, let go of my shoulder, and walked away to finish his tasks without another word. \n\n. Scene, midnight shift, \n\n. My shift started at midnight, \n\n. I need you to understand what the open ocean is like at night, far from any land, because it is nothing like darkness on shore. On land, even in the middle of nowhere, there is always some faint glow, a town below the horizon, the moon catching the edge of a cloud, something. Out there, on a moonless night, the dark is total. It is a suffocating, physical thing. The sky and the sea become one solid black wall, and the only line between them is the absence of stars where the water swallows them, \n, and the only light on the whole ship came from the harsh industrial floodlights mounted high up on the superstructure, throwing down hard white cones that lit the deck in glaring patches and made the shadows between the container stacks even blacker by contrast. Those shadows did not look empty. They looked full. They looked like they were waiting, \n, the wind at night was cold and damp, carrying a fine salt mist that bit through my jacket and settled on my face like the breath of something that had been underwater a long time. I pulled my collar up, took my heavy steel wrench, and went to work on the starboard side, checking the turnbuckles that held the bottom layer of containers locked to the deck. Crank, test the tension, move to the next. Crank, test, move on. The rhythm of it. The cold metal. The roar of the engines. I kept my eyes down. I kept my promise, \n, for the first 2 hours, nothing happened. Just the wind, the engines, the slap of water against the distant hull. I started to relax. I started, God help me, to think my father had gotten superstitious in his old age, the way sailors do, \n, then, around 2 in the morning, the sound of the wind changed. \n, scene, the song, \n, at first I thought it was just the wind finding a new path through the narrow gaps between the corrugated steel boxes, that whistling, moaning sound that a ship makes when the air threads through it. But it grew louder. And it became organized. It became structured. It became a song, \n, it was a slow, melodic humming, rising up out of the darkness over the edge of the ship. And it was beautiful. I want to be honest about that, because it is the part that frightens me most in hindsight. It was the most beautiful thing I have ever heard. It was warm. It was inviting. It felt like a memory of being a small child, safe and held, with someone humming you to sleep. It was so completely at odds with that freezing, industrial, lifeless metal deck that my whole mind seemed to tilt toward it, \n, and it did not enter my ears the way a normal sound does. I need you to understand this. It did not come from out there and travel in. It felt like the humming was already inside the center of my brain, vibrating outward, like the source of it was somewhere behind my own eyes. \n, I stopped working. I did not decide to stop, I simply found that I had stopped. The wrench had lowered to my side. A heavy, sluggish, syrupy feeling poured through my body, like the first warmth of falling asleep, and I felt my feet want to turn. I wanted to walk to the railing. I wanted, more than I have ever wanted anything, to lean out over the edge and look down and find the source of that warm and lovely sound, to let it fold over me, \n, and I took a step toward the rail, \n, and then I remembered my father's hand on my shoulder. The grip of those calloused fingers. The fear in his eyes. Do not look at the water, \n, have you ever felt like something was watching you, not paranoia, but a certainty, a pressure on the back of your neck that your body believes even when your mind argues? Tell me in the comments, because in that moment, standing on that deck, I felt it from below. I felt watched from beneath the water, by something that knew my name and was singing it. \n, I forced my eyes down to my boots. I gripped the wrench in both hands, raised it high, and slammed it down against the steel deck with everything I had. The clang was enormous, a harsh, ringing, ugly sound that tore right through the beautiful humming. I hit the deck again. And again. And again, making my own brutal noise, drowning out the melody with violence. \n the humming stopped, \n the normal world rushed back in all at once, the wind, the engines, the slap of the sea, and I realized I was breathing hard, my heart slamming against my ribs, cold sweat under my jacket despite the freezing air. I stood there shaking for a moment. Then I turned back to the turnbuckles. I just wanted to finish my row and get back inside, back to the lit, safe, ordinary interior of the ship, back to my bunk. I told myself it was a hallucination. Exhaustion. The wind playing tricks. I almost believed it, \n 10 minutes later, I heard the voice. \n scene, the voice in the water, \n knit was not a song this time. It was a human voice. A man's voice, yelling. Frantic, raw with terror, coming from the darkness just over the side of the railing, \n help. Please, help me. I fell over the side. I can't swim, \n I froze. Because I knew that voice. It was clear, it was close, and it sounded exactly, like one of the younger crew members, a kid who worked down in the engine room, a kid I ate breakfast with. And under the words I could hear the splashing. The desperate, thrashing, churning sound of a person fighting the water, the sound of someone being left behind in the dark as a ship the size of a small city slid past them at speed, \n hey. Please. Throw a ring. Oh God, I'm going under, \n and here is the thing. Here is the thing that I will be turning over in my mind for the rest of my life. The song, I could resist. The song was wrong, alien, too beautiful, clearly not of this world. But a man drowning? A crewmate calling my name for help? Every instinct I have, every value I was ever taught, every reflex bred into a person who works the water, they all fired at once. When someone is drowning, you do not stop and think. You do not weigh the options. You do not consider whether it might be a trap. You move. You move or someone dies, \n I dropped the wrench. It clattered on the steel. I turned and I sprinted toward the edge of the ship. \n I reached the cold metal railing, grabbed it with both hands, and leaned out over the side, looking straight down into the pitch-black water rushing along the hull, scanning the white foam for a face, an arm, anything, \n there was nothing, \n the water was empty. Black and rolling and absolutely, perfectly empty. The thrashing had stopped. The voice was gone. There was no kid in the water. There never had been. \n if this story is keeping you up, do me a favor and subscribe. We post new horror every single night, and trust me, the worst of this is still coming, \n I understood my mistake 1 full second too late, \n scene, over the side, \n I felt a sudden, massive shift in my center of gravity. I want to be precise about this, because it is what convinced me that what happened was not an accident. I did not slip. The deck was dry under my boots. The ship did not lurch or pitch. There was no wave, no roll. It felt, and I know how this sounds, it felt as though gravity itself reached up out of the black water, took hold of me, and pulled me forward and down. \n my boots left the deck. I went over the top of the railing, head first, tumbling through the empty freezing air. There was just enough time for a single thought, and the thought was, he told me. He told me, and I didn't listen, \n I hit the water hard. The cold was not cold the way you imagine cold, it was a physical blow, a hammer to the entire body, and it punched the air clean out of my lungs in a single involuntary gasp that filled my mouth with stinging salt water. My heavy boots and my thick waterlogged jacket turned instantly into lead, dragging me down. The salt seared my eyes. The world became a roaring, tumbling, lightless chaos, and I could not tell which way was up. /n/n I kicked. I clawed at the water, trying to claw my way back to a surface I could not locate. But the weight of my soaked clothes was too much, and the ship, the enormous ship, my only hope, was already sliding past, its great hull a wall of rushing steel, leaving me behind in the dark exactly the way that fake voice had described. I was sinking. I could feel myself sinking, the pressure building in my ears, the cold growing somehow colder as the water deepened. /n/n I forced my burning eyes open in the freezing black. /n/nan deep down below me, far down in the absolute crushing blackness, there was a light. /n/n seen, the light. /n/nit was small, and perfectly round, a sphere of soft warm light, hanging in the dark like a single bare light bulb burning in an empty windowless room. It bobbed gently. It glowed. And it radiated the most gentle, inviting, peaceful warmth, down there at the bottom of the world. /n/nan the moment I saw it, I stopped sinking in. Panic and started, drifting. Calm. A deep, heavy, total calm washed over me and smoothed all the terror flat. The burning need to breathe simply faded away, like a thirst forgotten. The thrashing animal in me went still. I stopped kicking. I stopped trying to live. I hung there in the cold and I looked at the warm little light, and I felt an overwhelming, gentle desire to just stop fighting, to let myself sink, to drift down toward that soft glow and let it hold me. It was the same warmth as the song. The same warmth as being a child. The same light. /n/nas I drifted lower, my eyes adjusted to the dim glow the light was casting, and I began to see the shape of the thing that the light was attached to. /n/n the glowing sphere grew out of the end of a thick, fleshy stalk. And the stalk grew out of a vast wall of dark, rough, mottled skin like the hide of something that had never seen the sun, pocked and pitted and gray-black, stretching out and away in every direction, further than the light could reach, vanishing into the black on all sides. I could not find the edges of it. It was not an animal in front of me. It was a landscape. It was the size of the seafloor. /n/nan directly below the glowing lure, the wall of skin was moving. It was opening. /n/nit was a mouth. A cavernous, circular, opening mouth, wider than a shipping container, wider than my mind could hold. And the inside of it was lined with rings, concentric, overlapping rings of long, curved, jagged teeth, ring inside ring, receding down into a throat I could not see the bottom of. And the teeth were moving. They turned slowly against each other, grinding in slow overlapping circles, like the inside of some enormous mill, as the jaw yawned wider and wider to receive me. /n/n the sheer scale of it paralyzed me completely. The calm shattered, but it was too late, the terror that flooded back and had nowhere to go. I could not swim. I could not scream, there was no air. I could only hang there in the cold water above that turning ring of teeth, looking down into the throat of something older than the ship, older than the route, older maybe than people, and I understood with a flat, final certainty that this was the last thing I would ever see, and that this was what had been singing to me. /n/n something grabbed the back of my jacket. /n/n seen, my father. /n/n the grip was fierce and sudden and human. I was yanked violently upward, hauled bodily away from the hypnotic glow, and the spell of the light broke like a thread snapping. I twisted my head around in the water. /n/n my father was right beside me, /n/Ne's face was paper pale, his jaw clenched so tight the cord stood out in his neck, his gray hair streaming in the black water. He had seen me go over the rail. And he had not hesitated for even 1 second. He had thrown himself off a moving cargo ship, into the freezing midnight ocean, into the water he had warned me about his entire life, into the dark with that thing, for me, /n/n he shoved something into my hands. Thick, coarse, wet nylon rope. I grabbed it on instinct, blind, my fingers closing around it. I looked up. The rope rose up and up through the black water, breaking the surface far above, trailing all the way up the rusted steel side of the towering hull to the deck. And up there, tiny against the floodlights, I could see the silhouettes of the crew leaning over the railing, hauling on the line with everything they had. They had seen. Someone had raised the alarm, /n/n my father grabbed the rope just below my hands. And we began to rise. Foot by foot, scraping and banging against the cold rusted steel of the hull, the crew dragging the two of us up out of the dark, our waterlogged clothes fighting them the whole way, /n/NWE broke the surface. /n/N I gasped, a huge, tearing, desperate gulp of freezing salt air that hit my empty lungs like fire. I coughed, retched, vomited seawater, gasped again. The roar of the ship's engines was deafening down here at the waterline, a wall of sound, and the hull scraped past us, close enough to touch, streaked with rust and weed. We hung from the rope, spinning slowly, rising. 20 feet up. We were maybe 20 feet above the water, /n/Nan that is when it stopped. That is when my upward progress simply, stopped. /n/N, seen, the thing that would not let go, /n/N something wrapped around my left ankle, /n/ knit was thick. Impossibly thick, and rough, and heavy, and cold, like a massive strip of wet cold leather cinching tight around my boot. And then the weight came. An enormous, world-ending weight, dragging straight down, and it nearly tore the rope out of my frozen fingers. I heard the crew above shout in panic as the line snapped taut and groaned. /n/ I looked down, /n/ now long, thick, dark gray appendage had risen up out of the black water and wrapped securely around my leg. I followed it down with my eyes, and below the surface, the warm light of the lure was glowing again, brighter now, fierce and steady, lighting up the dark shape of that vast open mouth waiting just beneath the waves. It had not given up. It had simply reached up out of the sea to take what it had marked, /n/ the crew hauled. I could hear them straining, roaring, the rope screaming through their hands. But the weight was too much. The thick nylon stretched, the fibers creaking and popping under a load they were never built for, and I felt myself slipping back down. My wet hands could not hold. My arms felt like they were tearing out of their sockets, the joints on fire. I was going to lose my grip. I was going to go back down into that mouth, and there was nothing anyone up there could do about it. /n/ I looked at my father, /n/ he was hanging on the rope right beside me, his own body wrapped around the line, taking some of my weight onto himself, his pale face inches from mine. He looked down at the thick gray appendage cinched around my ankle. Calmly. He studied it the way he studied a stuck turnbuckle, the way he studied a problem that needed solving. Then he looked back up at my face. And his eyes were completely, perfectly calm. There was no fear in them anymore. There was only that deep, unhurried, total focus. I had watched my whole life, and he let go of the rope with his left hand. And he reached into his front pocket. And he pulled out the small folding knife with the bright yellow handle, and he flicked the blade open with his thumb, the way I had seen him do 10,000 times, to cut a rope, to open a box, an ordinary motion, an ordinary day's work. And I understood, in a single horrible instant, exactly what he was about to do, no, I screamed, my voice raw and breaking, shredding apart over the roar of the wind and the engines. Stay on the rope. Don't let go. Dad, don't let go, and he ignored me. He looked at me one last time, and I have tried so many times since to read what was in that look, and the closest I can come is that it was not goodbye. It was not fear. It was a decision a man makes once in his life and is at peace with. It was unconditional. It was just love, with the fear burned all the way out of it. And then he let go of the rope. Entirely, scene, the sacrifice, and he dropped. He fell away from me, down through the air toward the black water, and as he fell he twisted his body with the practiced ease of a man who had spent 50 years moving on and around a sea, angling himself, aiming, pointing himself like a blade straight at the thick gray appendage wrapped around my leg, and he hit the water with a heavy splash and was gone beneath the surface, and I watched him sink. The yellow handle of that little knife gripped tight in his fist, the only spot of color in all. That black. I watched him kick, driving himself down, swimming directly at the rough gray hide of the thing that held me. I saw his arm draw back. And I saw it drive forward, sinking that small cheap hardware store blade deep into the dark flesh of the creature. And the reaction was instant and violent, and the appendage released my ankle and recoiled. The whole sea around us seemed to convulse, huge plumes of white foam exploded upward, the water boiling and thrashing as the thing spasmed in pain or rage, and then the gray limb whipped away and retracted, plunging back down into the deep, dragging the warm light down with it, faster and faster, until the glow shrank to a pinprick and winked out. And the enormous weight vanished from the rope all at once. Up above, the crew, still hauling with all their strength against a load that was suddenly gone, stumbled backward across the deck, and the rope shot upward, and me with it. I slid and scraped up the side of the steel hull, up over the rusted plates, and they dragged me over the top of the metal railing and threw me down onto the hard deck, and I hit the steel and I did not stop moving. I scrambled, soaked and freezing and screaming, straight back to the edge, grabbing the cold rail, throwing myself against it, looking down. Stop, I was screaming at the men around me. Stop pulling. Wait. Pull him up. My dad is still down there. My dad, pull him up, /N, but there was no second rope to pull. There was only the one. And it was already up, /N, scene, empty water, /N, dad, I screamed down into the darkness, my voice tearing itself apart. Dad, /N, and the crew swung the heavy deck flashlights down over the side, the beams stabbing into the dark, sweeping back and forth across the churning white water rushing along the hull. I gripped the rail so hard the cold metal cut into my palms and I stared until my eyes ached, waiting, praying, for his pale face to break the surface, for the yellow knife, for an arm, for anything. \n the water was empty, \n no light. No teeth. No gray limb. No father. Just the black rolling sea sliding endlessly past the hull, and the ship, the great indifferent ship, carrying on forward at speed, leaving the spot where he had jumped further and further behind with every second, swallowing it into the dark, \n they could not turn a ship that size around quickly. By the time anything could be done, the place where he went under was miles back, an unmarked patch of identical black water in an ocean the size of the world. There was nothing to find. There was nowhere even to look, \n what would you have done? Would you have gone over the rail after him? Would you have known, somehow, not to run to the edge in the first place? I have asked myself that question every single night, and I still wonder, to this day, whether there was any version of that night where we both came home. \n I stayed at that railing for hours. I would not move. They tried to bring me inside, out of the cold, but I shook them off. I stood there shivering violently in my soaked clothes, staring down at the water, until the black finally began to gray, and then to pale, and the sun came up over the edge of the world \n and when the morning light hit the sea, it looked completely, perfectly normal. Empty and flat and peaceful and blue, the way the ocean has looked on a calm morning since the beginning of time. As if nothing had ever been there. As if the water had simply closed over all of it and forgotten, \n seen, land, \n I quit the day we reached port. I did not give notice. I packed my bag, I walked off the gangway, and I never set foot on a ship again. I bought a bus ticket and I rode it as far inland as the roads would take me, to a small dry town as far from any coastline as I could get, where the air does not smell of salt and you cannot hear the water at night. I am never going near the ocean again as long as I live, \n but the silence in this little room is its own kind of drowning. Because every time I close my eyes, I am back there. I see the warm round glowing light hanging in the black. I hear the voice crying for help over the side, so human, so afraid, so much like a boy I knew. And I see my father, calm, focused, at peace, reaching into his pocket for that little yellow knife, and letting go of the rope, and falling, \n he gave me one rule. One simple, strict, clear rule. Do not look at the water. Keep your eyes on the deck. Ignore what you hear. If I had just kept my head down. If I had just trusted him, the way I should have trusted a man who had spent his whole life out there and learned that rule from God knows what or whom, if I had just ignored that voice crying for help, none of it would have happened. He would still be here. He would still be on a deck somewhere, working in his quiet unhurried way, checking the turnbuckles with those rough calloused hands, that yellow knife in his pocket, \n I am writing this down because I cannot carry it alone anymore. And because I need an answer to a question that is eating me from the inside out, a little more every night. I need someone to tell me the truth. \n did I kill my father by looking over the edge? Did my one broken promise drag him into that water? \n nor was the thing in the dark always going to take one of us that night, and did he simply decide, the moment he saw me go over that rail, that it was not going to be me, \n I don't know. I will never know. And the worst part, the part one cannot say out loud to anyone who knew him, the part that keeps me awake until the sun comes up, every single night, in this dry little room 1,000 miles from any sea, is that sometimes, in the deepest part of the night, when the silence gets very heavy and very total, I think I can still hear it. Far away, and very faint, and very warm. That slow, beautiful humming. singing me toward the water. /n/n subscribe for more horror every single night. And if you want more stories that will keep you up, check out What the Wow Stories for the wildest relationship drama you've ever heard. Link below. Sleep well.